What's going on, guys? This is Mias in another one of those quick interaction videos, just so I can give you guys as many tips as possible to increase your win rate and just be better at the game. So before you start, friendly reminder to like, subscribe, blah blah blah. Let's get into interaction number 1. Trap Tricks Rafflesia. What is the effect of the card? This card is unaffected by trap effects while it has exceeds materials, and you can also quick effect during their player's turn, detach one material, and then pretty much send one whole normal trap card that meets its activation condition from your deck to the grave. This effect becomes that trap card's effect when that card is activated. So what happens if your opponent controls exactly one monster that threatens you, and you want to use something like Treacherous Trap Hole to get rid of that monster? Well, Treacherous reads, if you have no traps in your graveyard, target 2 monsters on the field, destroy those targets. It's not destroy target up to 2 monsters. It specifically has to target 2 monsters, so this is an interaction that comes up quite often, where sometimes people have to target the alternative and their own Rafflesia, and for the longest time people had no idea if the Rafflesia was still unaffected by your own Treacherous or not. Well, let me tell you something. The effect that's going on right now, shockingly enough, isn't even the card Treacherous Trap Hole, but rather the effect of Rafflesia, which is copying Treacherous Trap Hole. So in other words, what's really going on is that we're not really trying to destroy alternative and Rafflesia with a trap effect, but rather with a monster effect, and Rafflesia is only unaffected by trap effects. Therefore, our own Rafflesia is going to die by our own effect, which is kind of funny, but yeah. Anyways, let's get into the next one. Okay, so this is going to be a 2-in-1 package deal. A lot of people don't understand much about the game. Let's just be completely honest. They see a card that is unaffected by other card effects, and they might believe that this means a lot of things, that you can't maybe kaiju it, you can't target it with card effects, and even if I say this right now, a lot of people might think, yeah, you can't target cards that are unaffected by card effects. That's true. No, you can target monsters that are unaffected by card effects. Absolutely. You can go spinny, target the Ultimate Falcon. It's a legal move. Unaffected just means you won't really feel the effects, even if they're positive, from the card. So spinny, even if you're trying to help that Ultimate Falcon by making it grow stronger, it's still going to stay at 35. It doesn't matter at all. And it's unaffected by other card effects, so including your own card effects, which is kind of ridiculous right there. But this is not the main thing that I'm trying to show here, but rather something else. With the video that I uploaded this morning, 10:30 EST, I showcased, I talked about Underworld Goddess of the Closed World, and how you could actually use that card in order to link off monsters that were unaffected by card effects, and a lot of people believed that this wasn't the case, because apparently Distant Coder, Kevin Rodriguez, said otherwise, and said, said that you couldn't use the effect of the Unchained Link 2 or the Unchained level 8 monster or whatever to link off your opponent's monsters that were unaffected by card effects. Let me tell you something. There's a huge difference between an effect and a summoning procedure, summoning mechanic, whatever. It's really not the same thing at all. It's kind of like saying a kaiju, the fact that you're tributing over an opponent's monster is still part of the effect. That's actually not true at all, and I'm going to give you another example of this, but rather I'm going to show you the proof that you can indeed link off opponent's monsters for Underworld Goddess. And if you read Underworld Goddess carefully, it's going to say you can only use one, you can also use one monster your opponent controls as material to link summon this card. This technically isn't even part of the effect of Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. It's just that it's written in the same kind of like box as, you know, the effect, but you still can't say that it's an effect of Underworld Goddess, because that's pretty much like saying that Summon Skull is an effect monster that is just printed as a white card, because it says like this card is always treated as an Archfiend card. That would be considered a condition, and you could actually have that on cards without them being effect monsters for, you know, all we know. So Underworld Goddess, same thing with Chimera Tech Fortress and Mega Fleet Dragon. Your opponent monsters can be unaffected, undestructible, untargetable, whatever. It doesn't matter at all. As long as they don't say this card cannot be used as like a link material or a fusion material or something, you could always be using them for stuff like that. Or if a monster says like this card cannot be tributed, you cannot kaiju it. But yeah, you get the point. You absolutely can use Underworld Goddess to link off Towers-esque monsters, but you cannot use the effects of the Unchained because they would actually trigger, unlike Underworld Goddess, which is just like an inherent summoning condition for the card. But let's get into the next one. Okay, this one is borderline idiotic, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people might still struggle with it even today in 2021. So I have Solemn Strike, my opponent is trying to make an Xyz monster. What would be the best way in Yu-Gi-Oh! To bait a Solemn Strike when you're playing like a rank 4 deck like Lightsworn, for example? Do you try to make Tornado Dragon? No, because if you Solemn Strike a Tornado Dragon, that's a clean 1-for-1 trade. It's not optimal, right? You want to screw your opponent over as much as possible. So the thing that you do is Minerva the Exalted Lightsworn. Now, a lot of people might be thinking, well, it doesn't change anything, because if you Solemn Strike Minerva, it wasn't, you know, destroyed correctly, it wasn't on your field, like, ever, so it won't be able to trigger the effect. That is absolutely incorrect, because it says if this card is destroyed by battle, or if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can use the effect to mill 3 and then destroy cards up to the amount of Lightsworn monsters that, well, Lightsworn cards that you send to the graveyard. So if you Solemn Strike with the Minerva, it doesn't have to be properly summoned on the field to trigger. Literally anything that is like in your deck, in your extra deck, in your freaking anything is always going to trigger when they are destroyed in your possession, as long as like the control didn't change. So if I went like Mind Control, Steel, Minerva, and then Darkhold, that's a completely different thing. Then the Minerva wouldn't trigger, but in this situation it absolutely does. And if you're lucky, look at how you can easily play through boards going second. You can destroy like freaking 3 cards and summon 3 wolves. Pretty nice, right? Okay, last and definitely not least, this one is really funny. Okay, so Sangan is face down, right? If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, add 1 monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your hand. The rest of the effect is just the errata, but this is the only thing that we're looking at. The opponent has Solemn Judgment. So when a monsters would be summoned, doesn't have to be like a normal or special summon, by the way, it's just summon. So even flip summon works, or a spell or trap card is activated, pay half, negate, blah blah blah. So what happens if the Sangan was already on the field? You're not like actually trying to normal summon the monster, it was already there, and then you're trying to flip it. Are you actually going to lose out to Solemn Judgment completely? The monster was already on the field, right? Well, it's funny because you still can't search with Sangan, because when you flip summon a monster, you kind of go back to the original state of even trying to summon the monster from your hand in the first place. So it's kind of like in a weird invisible transition limbo world of being on the field but not being on the field yet. So if you well, Judgment, not really Strike or Warning in this instance, the card is no longer on the field for like that very brief moment of time. So by the time it hits the graveyard, it just doesn't search at all. It doesn't matter, and it doesn't remember the last state that it was before. That's just of absolutely no relevance. And this applies for spells and traps as well, so there's just... you can always extrapolate with these kind of interactions, by the way. It's really not just a, oh yeah, only remember that for Judgment and Sangan. No. So for the True Draco cards, if a True Draco trap card was face down and then you flip it and use the effect, and your opponent goes like Cyber Dragon Infinity Negate, the trap card will not trigger to destroy the Cyber Dragon Infinity because it wasn't destroyed from the field to the graveyard. The activation got negated, even if you're trying to use the effect as well. However, if the trap card was already on the field and you're using the effect, your Cyber Dragon Infinity will no longer be negating the activation of the trap card, but rather the effect of the trap card, meaning that this time it did have the time to properly set up on the field and then go from the field to the graveyard instead of dying from, like I said, that invisible transition phase of being there but not really being there. You can kind of see it as when you're on the field, you're like on the ground, and when you're trying to be summoned, you're like in the middle. And then obviously in your hand, it's like up there, you can't really see anything, but whatever. I really hope I managed to make it as simple as possible. Make sure you like and subscribe. Motivates me a lot to keep making videos like these, I swear to God. And I will see you guys next time. Peace.